Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Safwa Baradi. I am a second-year international relations student at LSE, and I am very happy to see so many of you here with us today at this event hosted by the Territorial Club. So before we get into the event, if you could just turn off your microphones, please, for those who've just joined. Okay, so before we get into the event, I'm just going to remind us all of some very basic rules to ensure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. So first of all, please keep your microphones off if you're not talking and on if you are. Second of all, if you have any questions for the speakers, there will be a Q&A session at the end, so you'll have the opportunity to ask them. There are two ways in which you can participate in the Q&A. Either you can write down your questions in the chat and I can ask them on your behalf, or if you'd like to directly ask them, just use the raise your hand option on Zoom and we'll give you the floor. And finally, I do appreciate that this is a sensitive issue for many of you attending, but this is an academic discussion and it is a professional discussion. So there's no form of disrespect towards anyone, be it the speakers or the participants, will be tolerated. So please keep that in mind. Okay, perfect. Let's get into the event then. Okay, so today's event is about the Western Sahara conflict. And it's an issue of great importance, but it's one that tends to be underrepresented. So if you are completely unfamiliar with the Western Sahara conflict, then that's completely fine. And I would even say that that's perfect because the aim of this event is to inform people about it through different perspectives and different disciplines as well. So we have three speakers with us today who will now very briefly introduce themselves, and we'll do it in alphabetical order. So if you could please introduce yourself, Dr. Bennis. I think you forgot to turn on your microphone.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me. I am pleased to be here with you today. My name is Samir Bennis. For the past 4 years, I have been working as a senior political advisor to a Gulf States embassy in Washington. Before that, I worked for 8 years as senior advisor to the United Nations, and I studied in France, where I defend my PhD about the relationship between Morocco and Spain. And they work extensively on the Western Sahara and for Morocco's foreign policy, as well as the broader Middle East.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bennis. If you could introduce yourself, Ms. Naili, please.
Yes, of course. Can you hear me okay? Yeah?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the invitation. I'm really glad that you made this happen, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion. So I'm Meriem Naili, I'm French, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Exeter in England in security, conflict, and human rights with a case study on Western Sahara. So I have a legal background. I studied law and international law, but I'm doing a PhD in international relations. So I'm kind of interested in both fields. And I'm also a member of the steering committee of the International Academic Observatory for Western Sahara at the University of Paris Descartes, and recently joined the African Research Institute at the Budapest University. So I think that's brief enough.
Thank you, Ms. Naili. And finally, Dr. Zunes, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Again, thank you so much for putting this forum together. My name is Stephen Zunes. I'm a professor of politics and international studies at the University of San Francisco, where I was the founding director of the Middle Eastern Studies program. In addition to my work with various think tanks and nonprofit human rights groups and the like, I am the co-author of Western Sahara, war, nationalism, and conflict irresolution. The second and expanded and revised edition, which will be coming out in just a couple months.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll move on to my questions and we can kick off the discussion. Okay, that's good enough for me. All right, so the first question, it's broad and it's addressed to all speakers, so feel free to jump in and answer it. So Western Sahara is often described as Africa's last colony. Would you agree or disagree with this label, and why?
Well, the official term for a colony is non-self-governing territory, and that is the designation given by the United Nations and virtually every government in the world. It's an incomplete decolonization. That is, after long rule by Spain. Spain was to withdraw in early 1976. And but before the people of Western Sahara had the opportunity for a referendum, Morocco, and for a time Mauritania, ended up occupying the territory, and despite a whole series of UN Security Council resolutions calling for a referendum and the presence of United Nations peacekeeping forces to supervise it, Morocco never allowed the referendum to take place, presumably because they were reasonably confident they would lose such a referendum. The International Court of Justice ruled in November 1975 that despite some claims by Morocco that some tribal leaders had declared fealty to the Moroccan Sultan back in the 19th century, that did not trump the right of self-determination, which is again, every non-self-governing territory has that right. Now, whether they decide to be independent or part of Morocco, I don't care. It's just their decision. But they have to choose, and it cannot be an act of self-determination unless the option of independence is given. And so the and so yeah, but very much sees it as a colony. That's how the African Union has sees the situation. Indeed, the African Union has recognized Western Sahara as a full independent state, as a full member of the African Union.
If you allow me to jump on your question, Mademoiselle Safa, first, just to put the record straight. When we talk about colonies, colonialism was the result of what the European countries engaged on in 19th centuries until the 20th centuries. As far as I know, if you read the history with the objectivity, without any agenda, without being driven by any agenda, you would realize that Morocco has never been a colonial power. Morocco was rather the victim of European colonialism. If we go back to history, and I guess that's what most of those who support Polisario have failed to do for many years. They always try to portray the conflict as a conflict that starts in 1975 until now, and they do so purposefully to mislead and lure people into believing that there existed before 1975 a country that was colonized by Morocco. Yet, when you read history, you go back to the 19th century, you would realize that Morocco's claims to Western Sahara are backed by legal facts. There are countless documents, legal documents, and statements by heads of states in the 19th century that attest to the Western Sahara was under Moroccan sovereignty. One of them is the agreement signed between Morocco and the United Kingdom in the March of 1895, in which the United Kingdom said in a clear-cut way that the territory between Cap Juby, which is Tarfaya, and Cap Boujdour, which is nowadays Western Sahara, belonged to Morocco. Fast forward to 1904, in the middle of the struggle between France, Spain, and the UK over Africa, over Egypt, Morocco, and other parts of North Africa, France reached an agreement with the UK in April of 1904, by virtue of which it was agreed that France would give the southern Morocco, the Western Sahara, to Spain as part of its sphere of influence. In agreement signed between France and the UK in April 1904, there was a secret accord in which France committed not to undertake any action that would alienate the legal character of the Western Sahara. Yet, few months later, in October of 1904, France signed an agreement with Spain by virtue of which it gave the Sahara in full possession and sovereignty to Spain. This agreement by France and Spain violated the agreement signed between Morocco and the UK in March of 1895. That agreement signed between France and Spain violated international law. Why? Because both agreements between the UK and France and Spain were reached without Morocco's agreement, without consulting with Morocco, which held titles of sovereignty over the territory. In addition to that, for those agreements to be valid, the agreement signed between Morocco and the UK had to be denounced by one of the parties. Yet, according to Frank Trout, an American scholar who wrote an amazing book about the conflict, which apparently those who defend Polisario tend to overlook, he said that agreements signed between France and Spain, between France and the UK, and France and Spain in 1904 violated international law, because first, Morocco was not included. Second, neither Morocco, neither the UK denounced agreements signed in 1895 that recognized that Sahara was Moroccan. Fast forward to, I'm to be as brief as possible.
Yeah, if you could please be brief, we have lots of questions.
1950s and 1960s, Morocco was the first and only country that claimed sovereignty over the Sahara, and this was the first time in the Trusteeship Council and the UN Fourth Committee in 1957. Between then and until 1966, Morocco was the only country claiming sovereignty over the territory, and was the only party putting pressure on Spain to decolonize the territory. One very important fact that many overlook is that until December of 1966, the Sahara and Sidi Ifni was treated by the UN in the same package, meaning that Spain had to reach an agreement with Morocco on ways to decolonize both Sahara and Sidi Ifni and to return them to Morocco. But Spain had other plans. That's why in December 1966, seeing that Spain was reluctant to do so, Morocco called on Spain to allow the population of the territory to decide their future by way of referendum, knowing that this referendum was to take place in 1967. In Morocco's mind, a referendum in the territory at the time would tilt in its favor, but Spain had other plans. Spain wanted to create a satellite state in the territory, especially since it discovered that there was that it was rich of phosphates and also because of the fisheries, etc. And then in the 1970s and in the beginning of the 1970s, Spain took advantage of the disunity between Morocco, Mauritania, and Algeria, and tried to take it to its advantage to further assert its control over the territory. Then,
excuse me,
allow me, I could explain further, but I'm just trying to explain that the Sahara is not.
Make it very brief, just because we want to hear from the other speakers and some other questions.
Saying otherwise, it's just a fallacy.
Okay, thank you very much for this long historical expose, and thank you, Dr. Zunes, for intervening first on this.
If I may add just something, if I can.
Yes, of course.
Very briefly. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. It was a very interesting presentation of the historical background. I just wanted to answer your question, Safwa, because you asked whether we agree or disagree if it was a last colony in Africa. And just to give, because there might be some people in the audience that don't really know the history of Western Sahara. So as it is today, there are 17 non-self-governing territories listed by the UN, and Western Sahara is one of them. It's been there the longest. It's the biggest territory with the biggest population. And so, I mean, yes, it is. And it's the only one in Africa. So technically speaking, yes. And just, I'm not going to go back and not going to take everyone's time, but it's interesting to look like you just did, Dr. Bennis, on, what happened before 1975. But history doesn't start in 1975, but it doesn't end in 1975 either. Things happened after, and court decisions, and there are legal facts and legal principles, like the uti possidetis juris principle, which I believe Morocco adheres to because it's a member of the United Nations, and it's also a member of the African Union, and which says that we cannot go back to pre-colonial time borders. And that's it. I'm just going to end there because otherwise we won't have time to go to other questions. And I see a question as well. I've just looked through in the chat briefly for the census in the camp in Tindouf, the latest one.
We'll mention the questions in the chat at the end, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine.
Perfect. Thank you very much for all three speakers. I'm just gonna please ask you to keep your questions not as brief as possible, but just brief enough so that every speaker can intervene and we can leave time for the Q&A at the end. So the next question I would like to ask you, and this is something that you've all mentioned, the referendum. One point of contention is the question of eligibility to vote in the referendum, that is to determine the fate of Western Sahara. And MINURSO, which is the UN mission in charge of resolving the conflict, is still active. And part of its mission is to identify who can vote and also to organize a referendum. What is your opinion on the issue of eligibility? Do you have an opinion on who and who cannot vote, or how we should come to that, to a solution for that? And another question I would like to ask is, do you believe that the referendum is not the solution going forward anymore because Morocco has rejected the independence as an option and has instead proposed an autonomy plan?
It doesn't matter what Morocco thinks. What matters is what the people of Western Sahara think. And that's why the people of Western Sahara deserve a referendum to decide the fate of the territory. Morocco, of course, tried to stack the voter rolls with colonists, with people Moroccans whom they claim somehow had tribal ties to parts of Western Sahara at one time or another. But I mean, the UN, drew up some pretty clear plans, and I've interviewed countless UN officials during the period since the founding of MINURSO, and every one of them, and in generally diplomatic language, as they tend to do, we're quite concerned that Morocco kept upping the demands, and they kept on insisting on including people who were clearly not Moroccan, and that was really part of the problem. And I mean, normally the United Nations Security Council was saying, sorry, we got to go through this, but the threat of an American and French veto prevented them from doing so. And what's important is that the exact boundaries, of course, the colonial boundaries are somewhat arbitrary. It's important to know that the Sahrawis are different than most Moroccans, in that they speak Hassaniya, which is a very different dialect of Arabic. If you've been down there, you're going to notice the clothing, food, and a lot of the cultural things are very, very, very different. The role of women are very different in Sahrawi society. They practice fairly liberal interpretation of Islam. The women have equal rights to inheritance and divorce. They keep their maiden names. But they've been a free people who have never had a sultan or an emir. They don't want to be underneath an authoritarian monarchy. Indeed, historically, despite the claims to the contrary, Morocco never really had real sovereignty south of the Draa River. Again, claims of fealty by some sultans don't really count as that. So again, I like most people concerned about international law. Again, comes down to having the people have the right to vote. The people who based on the Spanish census of 1974 and their descendants, including those in the refugee camps, to be treated. The trouble is that it's very, very hard to that there needs to be some strict monitoring around human rights, et cetera, to make sure people can campaign openly and that kind of thing. But referendum is definitely the way to go forward. That's the way decolonization has worked. Some places, like in Puerto Rico, a non-self-governing territory, they voted to remain part of the United States. And and again, the Western Saharans can choose either way, but again, they need to have that choice.
So if I can jump to correct some misinformation that's
you can definitely jump in and give your opinion. Yes.
Just said, with all respect, Mr. Zunes, I have read your books. I have read your articles. I know.
If you could please just keep the back and forth about the points.
No. I am not going to. No, I'm not just going to stick this to facts. He said. Okay. He made the shocking claim that the Sahrawis are different from Moroccans linguistically and even ethnically. He appears to be making the claim maybe to draw a parallel between the Morocco and Timor-Leste, which he has made many times. Here I just want to put record straight, because I am shocked to see somebody say that women in Sahara have the right to inheritance and they can keep their name, which implicitly means that in Morocco they cannot do so, which is further, which could not be further from the truth. I'm just shocked. I'm sorry to say that. And just to be clear, Morocco and there is unity of language, ethnicity, and the relation between Moroccans and the Sahara. Let me remind you that the Sahrawis are Arabs and Berbers, and most of them they migrated from northern Morocco to the Sahara in the 16th and 17th century, and I'm not saying that. I'm not making this claim. This what historic books say. And many of the Sahrawis who are there, they are originally from the Shorfa, Idrisi Shorfa, which is the first dynasty that governed Morocco back in the 8th century. Again, I am not making these claims. All this is supported by books, and I can give everyone here attending this panel relevant biography to check this by themselves. To say something, to claim different, it's just shocking and shows that we are not talking about the same people. Second, when we talk about, I'm not going to make the parallel between to discuss the parallel between Morocco, Sahara, and Timor-Leste until somebody asks this question. I am going to stick to the question of the referendum. Many of those who support the Polisario always rehash the unfounded claim that Morocco has been party that stood.
Please stop saying I support the Polisario. I do not support the Polisario. I just support the right of self-determination. I support self-determination for Palestine. Doesn't mean I support the PLO or Hamas.
I did not mention you.
Self-determination for Kuwait and Iraq and India doesn't mean I support the monarchy there. So please.
I did not mention you. I am talking about Polisario. I said those who support Polisario, not you. I said those who support Polisario, not you. Those who support Polisario make the claim, not Stephen Zunes. I said those who support Polisario make always the claim that Morocco had stood in the way of the UN's attempt to hold a referendum. Yet I just refer you to the UN Secretary General report of 2000, to paragraphs 21 and 22. In paragraph 21, the Kofi Annan said that between 1994 and 1995, when after long consultations between the UN, Morocco, and Polisario, after the Polisario had agreed about the designation of tribal leaders to designate the Sahrawis able to participate in the referendum, it recanted its first decision and prevented and stalled the process. Then in paragraph 22,
I did not say that. I did not say that at all.
He said, look. First, please, Safwa, please, I am here. I am not making claims. This is in Secretary General report of February 27, 2000, and the report is 2163. Okay, please let me finish because I am not making claims. In paragraph 22, he said that in addition to refusing that the UN undertakes the designation of tribal leaders, in 1995, the Polisario refused that the UN goes ahead with the plan to open the appeal of Sahrawis categorized in the 1974 census as H41, H61, J51, and J52. This is included word by word in the UN reports, and I make here commitments. If anything I say here is not true after you make research, I commit to writing an apology and publishing it in any publication you want. In the same report, Kofi Annan made a sobering statement. I'm not saying here that Polisario was the only party that standing in the way. I would be dishonest to say so. Morocco also was not cooperating anytime it saw that its cooperation would result in an unfavorable outcome. Both parties were standing in the way. I just want everybody to be honest and say the truth. In the same report, Kofi Annan said that because of different ways in which the parties tended to interpret the relevant paragraphs, the provisions of the settlement plan, it was impossible to hold a referendum. That's why he asked James Baker to look for other ways to reach an early and agreed solution. This is the language of Kofi Annan. If you allow me, I would explain to you you can just say whatever you want because you are trying to interrupt me because you see that I am debunking the whole narrative that has been going on for years about Polisario, and I am not making claims here. I am using what Kofi Annan said in his reports, and nobody can deny that. Everyone can make claims.
I am denying it. I can tell you why.
Always prevails.
Thank you, Dr.
Please, I'm sorry. I can't let that pass.
If I could just give
the details of the referendum process you can find in our book, and it's very, very different than what was explained here. The Kofi Annan looking for alternatives were not because the referendum was not a good way to go, because France, the United States blocked the enforcement of the referendum. The United States and France insisted on keeping it under Chapter 6 instead of Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, so they weren't able to enforce it. But just because the France and the United States abused their veto power to prevent the referendum from going forward, it doesn't mean that the referendum is wrong. It means it's a matter of realpolitik. It's not a matter of international law.
So, Safwa, please, after Meriem speak, I want to explore to say something.
Miss Meriem, take the floor.
Sorry, Meriem, about that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really I would like to react on a lot of things, but I can't because we're short in time. But just a few things, again, I mean, we can quote, and I'm sure the quotes that you used, Dr. Bennis, are probably are accurate. I trust that. The only thing is, if we are going to make quotes, then we can make quotes. But this is not the only thing that the UN said about this conflict, and this is not the only thing about what the international law and the International Court of Justice said about the conflict. If you want to quote, I can quote you the International Court of Justice, which said,
please go ahead. That's why we're here. Please, please go ahead.
Okay.
I'm not going to interrupt you.
Please
go ahead.
Meriem, continue.
Yeah, I haven't interrupted you. So, but so in terms of the referendum, so I mean there are a few facts that nobody can deny, right? The referendum was agreed by both parties. Morocco agreed to a referendum, and that was a condition to end the armed conflict. It ended with a ceasefire and with the promise of referendum. The King Hassan II himself said the referendum was the plan. And then again, there are a lot of things we can talk about this for hours and hours, but the question of the referendum, the criterion that were set were agreed by both parties. I don't think anybody can deny that. And they were even extended. A few criteria were added at the demand of Morocco. So that is a fact, okay? And there was a list of voters that was published. And I'm sorry, but yes, Sahrawi speak Hassaniya. It's a different language. It's Arabic, but it's a different Arabic. And you can't say that they speak the same language as Moroccans. And so, I mean, again, list of criteria, a list was published in 2000. And after the publishing of this list, one party, Morocco, declined or refused to acknowledge the results. And that's a fact. Like, nobody can deny this, okay? And again, if we want to go back, and I go back, I have I'm a legal background, so I look at the law. And the referendum was agreed on the basis that Western Sahara is a non-self-governing territory, which the court found that it was, the people there was entitled to the right to self-determination. It wasn't a so-called terra nullius, which is a legal term to say that it belonged to nobody. And so the court found some legal ties between the Sahrawis and the Sultan, and some tribes, again, if you want to be accurate in quoting, some tribes in Morocco, in the Sultan of Morocco, and the Mauritanian entity. It's really important, but this does not prevent the implementation of an act of right to self-determination. So it's important to see that actually this consultation, going to the court was at the demand of Morocco and Mauritania. Mauritania also had claims on the territory. It entered into a war against Polisario and Morocco, only lasted 3 years. After 3 years, because of internal problems, they stopped. But after that, they stopped and never had any other claims because, I mean, they couldn't. Legally, they couldn't. So I'm going to stop there to give everybody the time to reflect and talk. And yeah, but I just wanted to also make a few points clear.
Thank you.
Question,
sorry, Dr. Bennis. I just have to remind you that this is
important. It's very
no.
important.
Excuse me. This is
no. There is a fact that not everybody should know. Is the referendum Morocco in 1981, in June 1981, during the summits of nowadays African Union, Morocco proposed the holding of a referendum of self-determination based on the census of 1974. But guess what's happened? Algeria and the Polisario refused it, claiming...
This is not true. Please, can we go on to the next question?
750,000 Sahrawis in the territory. Then I am not claiming this. This is contained in the report of the African Union meeting or in Nairobi in 1981. And everyone, at the end of the meeting, I can give everyone the links to check that by themselves. So if you are talking about the referendum, Morocco. offered that in 1981,
Sorry,
and they
Dr.
refused
Bennis.
it. And they refused it.
We have to move on. I just have to remind you that this is an event that's tailored towards students, many of which have not really heard about the conflict before. So this has to be informative. And as much as I appreciate all the information that you're giving, I have to ask you to be more brief about your points. We're not here. I'm just gonna ask you not to delve into too much detail, not because it's not important, but just because I wanna try and cover as many aspects of the conflict as possible to inform all the participants. Thank you again. Thank you for your points, but just keep what I said in mind moving forward. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next question. And this is about human rights. So human rights is often at the heart of the discussion of the Western Sahara conflict, and yet MINURSO is one of the only UN peacekeeping missions lacking a human rights component, monitoring component. What are the implications of such an absence in Western Sahara, but also in the refugee camps in Algeria?
It is a shame that MINURSO is the only modern peacekeeping force that does not have a human rights mandate. It's largely because France and the United States agreed with Morocco's insistence that it not. There have been many proposals to include a human rights mandate, both in the Moroccan occupied territories, as well as in the Polisario controlled regions, including the refugee camps in the Tindouf area. I think obviously the situation in the occupied territories is in particular is really terrible. I encourage people to look at recent reports by Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, where they talk about beatings, tortures, detention without trial, disappearances. I mean, you can't even wave a Western Sahara flag and without the secret police coming in and beating people up. And there are a lot of videos you can find online of these kinds of incidents. Freedom House came out with their Freedom in the World report just this past week, and they ranked Western Sahara among the 6 or 8 worst countries in the world, along with Tibet, Turkmenistan, North Korea. I mean, it's really, it's really bad. I have spent time in the occupied territories, and I've been to 85 countries, including Iraq under Saddam and Indonesia under Suharto. I've never seen a worse police state than Western Sahara. Morocco itself has liberalized, a fair amount to its credit in the past 20 years. But again, once you get into the occupied territories, it becomes a very, very different situation. The human rights situation in the refugee camps is not nearly as bad, but the Polisario unfortunately has put some restrictions, on certain levels of dissent, and that's why again I support having and again Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch kind of confirmed that. Both again, it's not nearly as bad as Morocco, but there's certainly some significant areas where improvement would be good. And so I thought that's why I just trust this idea of an autonomy proposal, because again, given the lack of human rights they have there, given the lack of the nonviolent protesters are routinely attacked and jailed and that sort of thing. I really don't think this kind of autonomy would work. We've seen where authoritarian states have granted autonomy, like Ethiopia with Eritrea and Serbia with Kosovo, but then end up revoking the autonomy and cracking down on dissent, and then these horrific wars ended up as a result. So again, I would I think I would strongly encourage people to read reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, because I think that they give and Freedom House, because I think they give a pretty good overview of how bad things are and why the MINURSO needs a human rights referendum, and why the people of Western Sahara deserve the right of self-determination.
Thank you, Dr. Zunes. I think Ms. Naili, you wanted to intervene.
Yes, just briefly, this is actually the topic of my research. So the absence of human rights component in MINURSO and its implications, whether positive, negative, or non or irrelevant, into the development and resolution of the conflict. So I don't have a final answer yet, but it's interesting to see that, you know, it has definitely become a tool for negotiation today. And I've, you know, many UN officials that I have interviewed have said, you know, whenever you mention human rights monitoring, locally table. And so it's really become something that it's a sensitive issue for Morocco. And it has always been, again, I mean, it's all in the UN Secretary General reports. It's been always against such monitoring for many reasons. And Polisario has actually always asked for this monitoring to happen, including in the refugee camps in Tindouf. So, you know, and one of the main, so the first visits of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights that happened in 2006, they wrote a report and it was leaked. It was supposed to be confidential, but it was leaked. And, you know, they link actually the human rights violations to the fact that the self-determination has not, the act of self-determination has not happened. So we can link the two. And today, on the ground, it means for MINURSO personnel that they cannot report human rights monitoring. Even someone going to them, whether it's in the occupied territory or in the refugee camps or the other part of east of the berm, they, you know, they cannot do anything for anyone victim of a violation. And so it is a bit disturbing, given that, you know, that this is, I mean, this is what the UN is supposed to be doing, right? Protecting people. And so, you know, it's the OHCHR, so the High Commissioner, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, that is doing monitoring remotely, but still doing monitoring. If you look at the Secretary General reports, the paragraphs on human rights, which only recently were added. When I say recently, it's 2011. After the Damizic event, and we can go into further details of those events later, but this is only something that happened, you know, over the last 10 years. And this is the OHCHR that, you know, include these paragraphs into the, I mean, the Secretary decides what goes and what doesn't go into those, but these are very interesting. So, I mean, the human rights question and the human rights monitoring question is a very, very important question. The question, because at the moment it's become a negotiation tool, and it's something that both parties use at the moment. And again, like I said, I've talked to many UN officials, and they've always said, you know, like, this is now, you know, talking about human rights monitoring. If you want to deal with Morocco, you can't talk about this. I'll stop there to give maybe Dr. Bennis the opportunity to.
Dr. Bennis, if you'd like to intervene, go ahead. Otherwise, we can move on to another question. Your microphone is off.
Thank you, Mademoiselle Safwa. I just want to correct one misinformation, not because we repeat allegations that they take the force of the truth. People have been saying for years that the Western Sahara is the only UN mission that does not have a human rights monitoring mechanism. Again, this is a flagrant lie, because if you go to the UN, it only takes few clicks in the UN website, and you would find that the UN mission in Liberia, which ended in 2018, did not have this mechanism. The UN mission in Abyei in Sudan does not have this mission. So again, this shows that the claim that Western Sahara is the only mission, UN mission, and also past UN missions, in addition to Liberia, did not include this mechanism. This again shows that the claim is just an unfounded claim that seeks to advance the narrative of the Polisario and the agenda of Algeria, which is the main party involved in the conflict, not Polisario, anybody else. Algeria is the main part. Please, Safwa, nobody should interrupt anybody. I have to finish my words. In addition to that, when we talk about Western Sahara, nobody can deny that human rights violations exist in Western Sahara as they exist in other parts of Morocco and elsewhere in the world. But what about the Tindouf camps? What happens there? Let me just remind you that the Polisario in its constitution states that no political party can be established in Tindouf camps until it reached independence. There is no dissenting voices in the Polisario that are allowed to be there. The Polisario have no refugee cards. This is in violation of international law. They cannot even move within Algeria. This again is against international law. So I have to take a call, and I'll be back.
So sorry, I'm sorry. I have
Okay, you go, Professor Zunes.
You know, saying that Algeria is the main part of the conflict. This is about Western Sahara. The Polisario is an indigenous popular movement. In fact, Algeria actually supported a rival pro-independence struggle. And subsequently, they become very dependent on Algeria on a whole number of levels. But it is not an Algerian creation. If Algeria cut off support tomorrow, it would certainly hamper the Polisario in many respects. But the struggle would continue, just like when the Soviets ended their support of the EPLF in Eritrea. You know, they had reverses, but they kept on struggling. And you know, the human rights situation, of course, in Algeria is pretty bad. I mean, I'm a big supporter of the pro-democracy movement there, despite what some people in the chats are saying that implies I'm somehow a supporter of that corrupt autocratic government. I'm not. I support human rights. Human rights everywhere. So I'm sorry, I just had to interject this thing that please don't pretend that this is about Algeria. This is about self-determination of Western Sahara.
And if I could just add one thing for accuracy's sake, you know, I have never said that the MINURSO is the only mission without human rights mandate. This is a false claim. It is. We can say this is the only modern, so post-Cold War mission.
Yeah, that's what I said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that you said modern. Yeah, modern mission. So after this, post the Cold War, currently deployed, that doesn't have a human rights mandate. And if you look at all the mandates that's been, deployed after that, they all have a human rights mandate. So there is a practice today in the UN with peacekeeping and human rights protection, but not for Western Sahara.
Thank you. Thank you to all three of you for your contributions. Yeah, I mean, I would say that it doesn't really matter whose sides you support, or even if you don't support any side, the question of human rights can be, you know, it's something you have to support as a human, you know. Anyway, and that's why I wanted to include the question, because I think this is something we can, that I was hoping we could find a ground to agree on. But I'll move on to the next question. And I think here, because Algeria has been mentioned and I can see that you have differing opinions, it might be interesting. And this is hardly a surprising question from someone who studies international relations. But I'd like to ask you, do you believe that tensions between Algeria and Morocco on the Western Sahara issue are the result of geopolitical considerations? And what I mean by that is that both countries supposedly have an interest in achieving regional preeminence. And following that same logic, would you say that direct clashes between Morocco and Algeria are likely to happen in the future?
Safo, let me please just finish my answer, because I had a call from my work, so I had to jump and answer it.
Very briefly, and then we answer this question. Very briefly. Sorry? Very briefly, please, so that we can answer this question.
Yeah, because I saw that somebody was shocked that Algeria is the main party. Of course, Algeria is the main party. Who has been supporting Polisario since 1974? Who took Polisario over since in 1994? Go and read what Daniel Lynn Price said in his book Western Sahara in 1979. Look what he said about how Algeria took over the Polisario. How the Polisario in his first Congress in May 1973 in Mauritania, no mention was of independence. No mention was of the territory where its struggle should take place. It was all about expelling Spanish colonialism. Then in its second Congress near Tindouf in August 1974, everything changed, and then it started calling for independence of the Western Sahara. Look what he said in 1979. There were 5,000 people in Tindouf. Half of them were were Sahrawis from the Algerian faction of the Regibat tribe in Tindouf, and the majority of people in the Tindouf were from Nigeria, Mali, Algeria, and Mauritania. And here, what let me just quote what Le Monde said in an article in 1979. Please,
sorry,
today,
Dr.
Spanish leaders.
I can't. We have to move on to the next question. Thank you for making it point, but we have to move on to the next question. Sorry, Dr. Bennis, I have
allow
to
me to finish because here we have to make things clear to people. Because,
I know, I understand. It's
not going to help them.
But it's just that we have very little time, and I want to leave time for the Q&A session. I can't be asking only my own questions. I am sure that there's, the speakers, the chat is quite busy, and I just want to allow time for the participants to be able to ask. I am not saying that it's irrelevant, but we just have to move on. If you would like me, I can ask my question again. If not, if you have an answer ready to go ahead.
In response to your question about the geopolitical thing, obviously, as you mentioned, Algeria and Morocco are both struggling for regional hegemony. There's a serious conflict, and serious conflict is one of the few closed borders in the world. You can't go between the two countries unless you take a plane or a boat. And the possibility of an Arab Maghreb union, which would be so beneficial for everybody, has been stifled because of Algeria and Morocco tensions. A good chunk of which, not all of which, has to deal with Western Sahara. I mean, certainly Algeria is trying to take advantage of the Western Sahara for its geopolitical interests, but they did not create the conflict. They are not the main party in the conflict. Similarly, I mean, it's kind of like during the Cold War, the U.S. insisted every third world leftist revolution was a plot of the Soviet Union. Yes, the Soviets wanted to take advantage of these things, but they didn't create the revolutions in Vietnam or Nicaragua or other places. Similarly, more recently, Russia's accused the United States of being behind these pro-democracy struggles in Ukraine and Serbia and elsewhere. And again, the U.S. obviously wants to take advantage of these things, but again, in all these cases, including Western Sahara, I'm really bothered by this denial of agency. The denial of agency that the people themselves who are involved in the struggle are doing so because they want freedom. They want an end to the repression, and no amount of money or arms from a foreign government is going to lead people to rise up unless they had their own motivations for it. And again, the biggest struggle in Western Sahara has been the nonviolent struggle. The nonviolent struggle taking inside the occupied territories that have involved tens of thousands, like we've seen in the savage repression, back in the fall of 2010, of the big protest encampment, just outside of Laayoune. And again, I would refer to the Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and others about how the nonviolent struggle has been suppressed. We think of people like Aminatu Haidar. So she's called the Saharan Gandhi, for her leading the nonviolent protests. She's won the Right Livelihood Award. She's won the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award. She's won recognition, from the EU, from the Russell Train Foundation, from others, and she's been nominated multiple times for the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, these are the people, it's people inside the territory, that are really are really in the forefront of the struggle there. And the idea that somehow these are all agents of the Algerian regime is a fantasy that every authoritarian government has always used. That it's always outsiders that are somehow making our people who would otherwise be content to rise up. And you shouldn't buy it. And in these other cases, you shouldn't buy it in the case of Western Sahara.
Let me please just address some your question. First of all, Morocco is not an occupying power of the Sahara. There is not a single Security Council resolution or a General Assembly resolution that's
There's two General Assembly resolutions in early 1990s. Use the word
in 1979 and 1980. Ever since then, it has never been mentioned. And here, since you are a professor of international law, let me just remind you of the consistency of practice in international law. By the way, the consistency of practice, international law, is the reason why the ICJ in 1975 decided that the Sahrawis had the right to self-determination. Why? Because Morocco in 1966 accepted that a solution to the conflict be through a referendum. Because of that, since 1966 until 1975, the consistency of practice of Morocco and other states led the ICJ to the conclusion that the solution should go through a referendum. Now, for the past 41 years, not a single UN resolution has mentioned Morocco as occupying power. If we apply the principle of consistency of practice in customary international law, that means Morocco is not occupying Western Sahara. No country can occupy a territory that has always belonged to it, but was snatched by colonial powers. Second question, the claim that Sahrawis are struggling for the independence. What Sahrawis are we talking about? Why the Polisario has refused repeated attempts by the UN to conduct a census in Tinkoudou camps? The reason why is because they know that more than half of the people there are not Sahrawis. They are from Mali, Niger, Algeria, Mauritania, and Libya. And the overwhelming majority of Sahrawis, they live in Morocco. And most of them, they are elected officials, and they run the affairs of Western Sahara. These are the facts. Saying otherwise is tantamount to just living in a bubble and lying to people in a hope that they will buy into this propaganda. Because there is propaganda, and there are the facts that are backed by documents. If you go to the UN, you will not find a single resolution that describes Morocco as an occupying power.
That's not true. Please look at the truth.
Can I say something?
Like it or not, this is the truth.
I'll give the floor.
I know what I'm talking about, and you know it.
To Ms.
You know that. You know this. I'm not talking just out of
okay. Well, I have to say, well, I don't know. It's very puzzling. I just sent a link to a document. This is the UNHCR census in the Tindouf camp from 2018. So, there has been a census done, and we know how many people live there. And unlike in the occupied territories, there is UN personnel on the ground other than MINURSO, and there are other Oxfam, other NGOs on the ground to witness everything. That's the first thing. The second thing, on the occupation term, yes, it's been used by the Assembly General in 79 and 80. Yes, it is a long time ago. This doesn't mean that it doesn't apply anymore. Nothing says otherwise. Nothing says it's not an occupation anymore. And other courts and other jurisdictions around the world have used the word occupation again recently. So if I go into the Court of Justice of the European Union, the Advocate General in 2018 used the word occupation, and even a decision that was rendered in the press release, it says occupation. And Morocco doesn't consider itself an occupying power. It doesn't even consider itself as an administering power. But in terms of legal, if you want to use legal terms, this is what it is. And I've put a link to the UNHCR census.
Speaking about legal terms, first of all, the European Court of Justice does not describe Morocco as occupying the Sahara. And if you talk about legal terms, if you go and check what customary international law means, what the consistency of practice means that consistency of practice of member states, of individual member states and international organizations, chief of which the UN, have produced legal consequences over any conflicts. Over the past 41 years, there has been consistency in the UN about not using the word occupation in their resolution. Also, there is not a single Security Council resolution that's mentioned Morocco was an occupying power. If we want to talk about international law, let's talk about it and let's enlighten people about that.
Okay, customary international law is made by the states, not by but state practice, not by the UN institution practice.
Absolutely, and it takes the force of law. It takes the force of law.
Yeah.
It takes the force of law because of the consistency of practice of states. Because
and the force of law is that there should be a initially that Morocco should withdraw from Western Sahara and allow for an act of self-determination. Morocco refused to abide by those 3 UN Security Council resolutions, but again, France, the United States blocked the enforcement. They've had
the same talking points.
Resolutions calling for a referendum.
Talk to me about consistency.
Please, let's not interrupt each other. Let's respect each other.
Because he starts doing that.
I mean, we've seen this over and over again. You know that the Iraqis took over Kuwait because it was supposedly historically a part of Iraq. The Indonesians took over East Timor because it's supposedly historically part of Indonesia. You know, the Israelis claim the West Bank was part of ancient Israel, so therefore they have a right to colonize it and take over.
These are disingenuous
comparisons. Sort of historical things. They do not trump international law, which forbids countries from expanding their borders by force. It is
Morocco did not expand.
It's illegitimate for any country to expand their borders by force, and that's true with
Morocco did not expand its borders by force. There is not a single resolution that
I have
says
to remind both speakers that when talking at the same time, none of your points can be heard, and this renders the conversation useless. So please respect each other.
Okay, so I'll repeat what I said then without interruption, hopefully.
Please, yes, thank you.
We've seen is that conquering powers, whether it be Iraq and Kuwait, Indonesia and East Timor, Israel and the West Bank, et cetera, have used this idea that, oh, this territory is historically ours, and so that therefore trumps international law, which prohibits countries from expanding their territory by force, and which specifically, grants non-self-governing territories or recognized states the right to self-determination. And so this is the international legal question that is here, and that's why Western Sahara is so important. Again, I don't care, whether Western Sahara chooses independence or not. I certainly do not support the geopolitical agenda of an autocratic state like Algeria or anybody else. But they have the right to self-determination, to choose their own future, and nobody should be able to take that away from them. Because if Morocco can get away with taking over a Western Sahara, it's going to be a very bad precedent. It'd be the first time since the signing of the UN Charter in 1945 that a country has been allowed to expand its territory militarily, and it would be the first time that a colony had not been allowed the right of self-determination. So these are some very important legal principles here.
Dr. Bennis, you can go ahead, and please let's make nobody's interrupting.
There is not a single UN resolution or document that says that Morocco expanded its borders militarily. Nothing at all. I challenge anyone to do that. And if you find this, I commit to write an apology about that. And this brings me to the question that the Sahrawis speak Hassaniya, but so do the other Sahrawis who live in Gulmim, in Tarfaya, and Sidi Ifni, which are also part of Morocco. So if we talk about the Hassaniya, so if they speak the Hassaniya, they don't speak the Arabic. So if we are talking about something, let's be serious and put all the facts for people to understand. Second, we cannot compare apples and oranges. We cannot compare Iraq and Kuwait. First, Morocco is a 12th century nation state. It's not Iraq. Iraq and the whole Middle East was for 4 centuries under the Ottoman Empire. Morocco was not under the Ottoman Empire. Even Algeria was part of the Ottoman Empire. Algeria as a state was created by France in 1962. Morocco was created in the early 8th century. Whether you like it or not, these are the historical facts. And we cannot just start making these comparisons to try to lure people. People are smarter than we think. Especially we live in a world when anyone can find information with it takes only one click to find information. Making these comparisons are just disingenuous and shows the shallowness and the weakness of the arguments that these people are using to defend a cause that is lost. If you think that Moroccans, and me, one of them, would allow anybody to touch an inch of our territory, you are mistaken. The Western Sahara is in our blood, because we know that Morocco has been wronged by history, has been wronged by its neighbors. First of them, Algeria, which stabbed us in the back as first as it got independence. It stabbed in the back the first country that helped it throughout the war of independence. The first country that provided it with medical, military, financial, diplomatic, and political support throughout the war of independence. So just be sure about that. That Moroccans are mobilized and will be mobilized to stand against anybody who tries to spread propaganda and tries to defend a fictitious state that will never exist.
Thank you, Dr. Bennis. I want to make sure to leave some time for the Q&A, and we're going to have to end the event in the next 20 minutes. And I see that the chat has been very active, maybe too active. So what I'm going to ask you now to do to all the participants is, if you have a question, it would be better to start with by raising your hand and then asking it directly, while I'll try and pick some questions from the chat. So if anyone wants to intervene, please raise your hand. There's quite a few in the chat, but so please don't hesitate to just speak. Okay. I'm just gonna check. Okay, I'm gonna go to Imami Malainin. I am sorry if I'm butchering your name, but go ahead with your question. And I'm gonna ask again to be respectful towards the speakers and to be respectful towards the other participants. Otherwise, I am gonna have to not accept your questions. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for organizing this and putting this together. I know it takes, it's not easy to organize such an event and talking about this sensitive topic. I would start by introducing myself. I am from this region, like from Layun. My family name is Meriem, and I'm one of these people who speaks Sahrawi, as this is a big point that takes a lot of time to talk about. I've been blown and I've been lost by the amount of points that this discussion that meant to be academic talking about this issue. I'll start by trying to answer this Sahrawi point about we speak different thing than the other Moroccans. I am a Moroccan by convention, and I know, and I have my own reasons. I know that some of my families are on the other sides and they have their own reasons, and it's political, ideological driven, and we should be honest to ourselves and to state things as they are. Morocco is multinational, multi-ethnical, and we speak different languages in Morocco. We have Amazigh, we have Sahrawi, we have Rifi, and this isn't something that would make us or tear us apart. We still think that we are a united country, and we have our reasons to say so. Other than that, this is a heritage from the colonization. This is something that the European countries, some of the European regimes made and put us into this problem. Yes, we feel very sorry that some of our neighbor are taking this further, and some of the people or some of the minority are still stubborn and thinking that this is an independent state, which isn't true. But moving swiftly on to the second point, because I've heard a lot of misquotations, a lot of misinterpretations, and a lot of misinformation as well. If we're talking about the referendum is a democratic way for people to choose to where they belong. Yes, we agree on that. But the mechanisms of organizing a referendum is not there anymore. Me, as a person who lived in Laayoune and who grew up there and knows every Sahrawi tribe, I am from Al-Ainin one, and there is Al-Ghaibat, Al-Arusiyin, and there are a lot of Sahrawi tribes, and we know that from the other side, we have the members of our families are there, but we have people from Morocco who were born here and who were born in Laayoune. I'm living right now and studying in London, who were born, and they are Moroccans and they have the right to be living there, and they lived there all their lives. And from the other side, we know that our people from Mali and people from Algeria, they made family from the other side, such as my aunt, and they have the right to vote or not. I'll be brief.
I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt you to remind you that you have to ask a question, because there's quite a few people who want to have the chance to do that. As much as I appreciate your contribution,
question because I'm apart from this place, and I heard a lot of misinformation. I feel like I am in the position to answer them. My grandfather was Sheikh Al-Ainin. If you read history,
he was about to mention that.
My grandfather is Sheikh Al-Ainin. He is the one who leads the whole tribes from this region to fight the colonization. Guess who they fought? They fought both French and Spanish colonization, where they were defeated in the Battle of Sidi Bou Atman. Where is Sidi Bou Atman? In Marrakesh. So he fought in 1912. So he fought from Dakhla to Marrakesh. What does that mean? It means that and they have the election.
You have to ask a question, otherwise I'm going to have to give the floor to someone else.
I'll be brief and then answer this.
No, I'm sorry, I can't give you the floor anymore. I'm sorry. Do you have a
question?
Thank
you so much.
I'm not sure what
Thank
this
you.
is all
No.
about. I never claimed that because
I'm not saying that you claimed anything. I understand your point of view. I understand that you ask for a democratic mechanism, which is referendum. It happened in Spain, it happened in France, but no one talked about it. Why not talking about us? Why not zooming on us? Why not taking it beyond? This is what astonished me. It happened in Barcelona, and there is the Basque, and there are critical people that are trying democratically and raising their voices to call for this. I am one of the victims of this problem that happened before I was born, and this is something that surprises me, miles and stones. But yet I understand this is a very political and this is a very ideological, and each one of the parties has their own interests. Okay. I claim myself
and you, I'm sorry. I've given you the chance to ask the question. I have to move on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your contribution.
I think it would be very clear. Again, I'm not saying that everybody with a different language has the right to separatism. This is not a separatist movement. This is a separate country that has the right to self-determination. This is what the United Nations says. This is what the International Court of Justice.
Can I answer this point of the United Nations? Yes. The Security Council and the Fourth Committee. Can I answer this? The last thing. Safwa, one last point about the United Nations, please.
I have to give the floor to the other.
And again, this is it has.
Safwa, please. Can I take?
Sahara has
both of you, excuse me, but please, Atman Khabaj, if you could ask your question. Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't want to be interrupting anyone. I don't want to be rude, but I have to be aware that there's other people who have interest in asking questions, and I have to give them the floor. So, Atman Khabaj, again, if you could ask your question.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say first, thanks, Safwa, for organizing this, and quite a heated debate, quite emotional at points, but I appreciate the efforts on both parts. My question here is more a bit on more of a scholar kind of question. So, in your view, what justifies like a secession kind of movement or autonomy or separation? Because right now there are a bunch of regions around the world that kind of want to be granted autonomy, like Western Sahara, Catalonia, or even back in the days when the US wanted to kind of secede. So in your view, from a scholar perspective, what are the building blocks that kind of justify from a region in the world like separation and actually becoming its own country?
That's what I actually was trying to mention right here, is that whether generally the territorial integrity of recognized nations is recognized, and that generally, depending on the constitution or whatever of the other country, that generally separatism is not recognized. But again, Western Sahara is not a case of separatism. It is recognized as a distinct legal entity by the United Nations, by the International Court of Justice. It's been recognized at one time or another by over 80 countries as an independent country. It's a full member state of the African Union. That's very, very, I mean.
It's only 37 countries that recognize right now. 37, not 80 countries.
You can't say about virtually any other kind of separatist movements, because it's not a separatist movement. That's what makes it legally distinct. And again, as I was trying to say before, I'm not saying the fact they speak Hassaniya gives them a right to secede or anything like that. What gives them the right is that they are recognized non-self-governing territory, and therefore they have a right to self-determination, whether it be independence or whether it be part of Morocco.
Just to answer this question, he said that the Polisario is not about separatism, it is a country, it is an entity. I just want him to ask me to locate for me where in history there existed a country called Western Sahara or Sahrawi people. If we talk about the Sahrawi people, there are Sahrawi people in Mauritania, southern Algeria, Libya, and Mali. So if we talk about people, about linguistic and ethnic unity, so the Sahrawi people as such is the whole region. Second, there is no country that exists before this is called Western Sahara or the Sahrawi people. Second, when the Polisario, the territory was described as non-self-determined governing territory, it was in 1963. It was done at the request and after the pressure of Morocco. This was done 10 years before something called the Polisario was created. In the meantime, there was other movements that were created in the territory. One of them was the movement de la résistance des hommes bleus, the Morhoub, and its leader was Edouard Mouha, who was born in the territory in 1943. This man was the first movement that was recognized by the African Union, but by then the Organization of African Unity. Then that movement moved its headquarters from Rabat to Algeria in 1975. Then at the end of 1975, it moved back to Morocco and said that it was disillusioned with Algeria after it's created. It took over the Polisario and used it as a tool to create a satellite state in southern Morocco. These are the facts. Self-governing territory was created 10 years before the Polisario. And you are talking about the Sahrawis. Here you are in front of the great child of Ma al-Aynain, who and his children have fought Spain and France throughout the 19th century. And Ma al-Aynain created his capital was Samara, and he was receiving support from Moroccan Sultan Hassan I, and he swore allegiance to it, and he was the leader of the tribes that fought France and Spanish colonialism. As Mr. Ma al-Aynain said, the conflict is about ideology and about Algeria's aims to be the hegemon of the Maghreb. But as I said, Algeria will never achieve that.
Thank you, Dr.
I'll say it once again, that this is not, I mean, most countries in the world did not exist prior to colonialism. That doesn't mean they don't have the right to self-determination.
But not Morocco. Morocco is a 12th
Prior
century
to
state.
colonialism. There's never a Mali prior to colonialism. There's never. Yeah, I mean, you go down the list. That does not mean people don't have the right of self-determination. And why? And again, stop bringing up Algeria. I don't care about Algeria. I care about the people of Western Sahara having the right of self-determination. And this is all. There should not be too much to ask. This is the 21st century. This is not a time where countries can sort of decide that they get to conquer their neighbors and claim that that it used to be part of our country, so that's by some historical claims, therefore it's ours. Again, that's the United Nations Security Council does not approve that. And then the General Assembly and World Court. I mean, again, Morocco is an international outlaw in this regard. They really are, and that's why. And again,
what a fat lie! What a fat lie! What the fuck, like to make such claim from a scholar?
When has the Security Council said that Western Sahara?
What a fat lie!
None of them have.
Honest lie to claim such. That's about Morocco. What about Algeria? Tell me to where Algeria stands now with regards to Morocco. Algeria that has been using anti-Semitic language against Morocco ever since Morocco has.
Why are you asking me to defend an Algerian regime?
I'm gonna have to put an end to this debate for now. There's only just maybe a few minutes left. So
can I just say something maybe, because they got both the opportunity to speak and I haven't.
Yeah, okay, for sure.
Thank you. I'm just to put things clear today what things are. You want to talk about facts, that's fine. The fact is Western Sahara is a non-self-governing territory which is entitled to the right to self-determination, whether they want to be integrated into Morocco or independent. This is their right. And to this day, all the Security Council resolution talk about this right to self-determination. If there is a right to self-determination granted to them, it means they are a people. They exist as a people. And in the Court of Justice of the European Union, this is what is going on at the moment. There were agreements signed between the EU and Morocco that on the ground, in practice, included products from Western Sahara, but Western Sahara was not mentioned in the agreements. So the court said you cannot sign anything with Morocco that includes products from Western Sahara without the consent of the Sahrawi people. So this is a fact. You cannot deny. This is what's happening. This is what the law says. And again, uti possidetis juris, it's a principle of international law that, and again, like Professor Zunes said, a lot of countries in the world wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for colonialism. And Morocco adheres to the charter of the African Union, and it's in there, and it's here in a member state. So it should abide by the law. And this is as simple as that.
About European Union, Mr. Meriem, Mademoiselle Meriem, please, if you say something, don't tell a story that is incomplete. You stopped as, yes, the European Union at some point said that Sahara was not included, but then in 2019, the European Union said that it has conducted meetings with Sahrawis in Western Sahara it came to the conclusion that the agreement which was approved in 2019 would benefit the Sahrawis in the region. Second point, yes, Security Council resolutions mention the self-determination, but it does never mention a referendum. And let me here just to be clear, self-determination, according to resolution 2625 of October 1970, says that self-determination can be achieved through independence or integration with an independent state or through autonomy. So self-determination does not only mean independence. And that's why, because over the past 20 years, the UN, the Security Council, which is entitled, which is entrusted by the international community to preserve international peace has sought an alternative solution. And that's why in none of the Security Council resolutions since 2007, none of them mentions referendum. All of them, they call on the parties to achieve a mutually acceptable political solution, mutually acceptable solution. If we want to be honest, mutually means by consent that both parties have to agree. And
you have to finish the sentence, though. You have to finish the sentence. Mutually acceptable solution that will provide for the self-determination.
Which provides for the, which provides. But as I said, that self-determination can also be achieved through autonomy.
I never said that self-determination meant independence. I never said that.
But I'm not saying.
Specifically said they could choose integration or whatever.
Exactly. So don't make me.
Sorry, guys, you're talking over each other. We can't hear.
Let me please finish. Let me finish my idea, because this is very important idea. Security Council, even since 2007, has called on the parties to reach a mutually and agreed political solution that would be acceptable to both parties, of course, that would provide for the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. This is what it says. But as I said, self-determination can also be achieved through integration or autonomy, which Morocco has presented in 2007, and its proposal has been described as serious and credible, and the US and major countries have supported it. So this debunks the claim that Morocco is an outlaw. An outlaw is a country that supports Iran, which is an outlaw. Morocco does not support these kind of countries. And in addition to that, since resolution 2440,
sorry, Dr. Bennis,
UN has more parties to reach a compromise-based resolution.
Excuse me, Dr. Bennis. I am sorry, this conversation could go on for hours, and it's been going on for decades now. But I have to put an end to the debate because the speakers have other commitments to attend to. I am sorry to Sarah. I think there was Zindine and all the others who asked the questions in the chat. There was just simply not enough time to get to the questions. But as a last word, thank you, Dr. Zunes, thank you, Dr. Bennis, and thank you, Ms. Naili, for agreeing to participate in this event. It can take a lot of courage and bravery to agree to an event like this, especially when you have conflicting views. But I would say that other than some moments during the event, we've all handled it pretty well. Again, thank you so much, and hopefully we can find the opportunity to organize events around this issue and this topic in the future as well. And I hope that the people who weren't familiar with it have learned something. And even the people who were familiar with it, I think even more importantly, I hope that you have learned something as well. Thank you so much, and hopefully see you. Thank you.